Back in the day, probably my biggest confrontation with life was with like a partner that I had. Just like I struggle with connecting with people in regular life. There's a great temptation to just fall down on yourself in a sense and consider yourself to be the reason why people aren't really positive with you. One of the struggles that I've had from the beginning is just having like a kind of romantic relationship. A friend who I was working with on a film introduced me to a new girl, and that girl was the one who actually helped me get in touch with the worst parts of myself so that I could find the best parts. Ever since that time, I've had this kind of like disconnect from having romantic relationships to the point where I just didn't have any kind of relationships with girls at all. I mean, in falling in love with myself, the temptation was to like fall out of love with myself and into a relationship with another person. More than anything, I started to fantasize about like the kind of relationships that I could have. Having struggled so much with relationships in the past, almost always ended up having the same theme brought up again and again. The same theme that's being brought up in my life a lot right now is the concept of good and evil. We choose good in order not to be evil. At least we think we do. We really just think that we do. But really a lot of the time what we're doing is we're choosing evil in the name of good. Whereas we could take an evil to actually achieve good. There's a story in one of the most famous writers of all time, hailed as possibly one of the best writers, William Shakespeare. The story is Romeo and Juliet. And so in the story, you have Romeo. I think he's part of the, I might get this wrong, he's part of the Montague family. And then Juliet's part of the Capulets. And the Montague family and the Capulet family are bitter rivals with each other, literally to the point of murdering each other. They have been bitter rivals as long as anyone in this story can remember. It's a long-standing fight against each other. But in this long-standing war with each other, two people in opposing houses somehow find the way to meet each other. That mischievous, time-wasting Romeo, that rebel Romeo, sneaks illicitly into the Capulet household during one of their parties, chasing Rosalind. He chases Rosalind because he's so enamored with her. But along this chase, just like how Spirit uses the carrot to kind of lead you to your main purpose, he somehow comes across the vision of Juliet. And that vision captivates him in every way. But she is literally the daughter of like the leader of that Capulet family, the person who's in charge of that war. She's the daughter of him, and he is the son of the king on the other side, so to speak. Warring families. All they know is war, all they know is fighting. But in that odds, somehow, they produce this anomaly in these two people who come together, Romeo and Juliet. They produce this anomaly that somehow finds the other irresistible, and they fall in love. And because of the war of their family, each family ends up losing the treasure. The message that Romeo and Juliet are trying to send to them is about that kind of unity between differences. What is evil is not evil like you think it is. You're not actually at war with anything but yourself. And to be like that is the end of everything that is the most truest heart inside all of us. And so life inevitably creates these experiences in all our lives. It creates these endless amounts of beautiful contradictions. There's going to be all kinds of very, very challenging and bizarre and controversial realities that actually exist in the world that would be challenging to any and all of us in all sorts of miraculously strange kind of ways. Things that couldn't possibly be a thing, like a Montague and a Capulet being in love with each other. It's bizarre, it's strange, it's unnatural, but it isn't. It was always meant to be. And it's like that kind of recognition to each of us in our lives of following what you truly passionately desire in your heart of hearts, what truly makes you inspired and in love with yourself, beyond what your parents, your family, your friends, your spouses say. When you truly follow your passions, when you're truly in love with yourself, it doesn't matter if what seems to be the whole universe contradicts you. That point, that single point of true, honest love for what it is you are in love with is more powerful than the world of physicalness telling you the reverse of that. It tells you that it's wrong, but you know in the core, in the point, that smallest little point of truth within you, that's power. That's love. That is excitement. That is why you're here. You are like the star in the center of an abyss of darkness that reaches on seemingly forever, but your light is strong enough to power itself and many other planets and be seen all the way across the universe. Most of the time, you find that love in the opposite place you're supposed to be in. You're not supposed to be there, and that's where it is. And so you have to cross like certain restrictions, or even things you've been taught are negative and evil and wrong. You have to cross them into actually finding that it is right, and that the only thing, like I said, the only thing you're betraying is betrayal itself, especially when you find things that you're authentically and absolutely in love with. When you honestly find those things, they almost always are behind like a glass wall, so to speak. Or there's a piece of string with like a sign written in crayon, wrong way. That's like how it seems to be. But I tell you, from spirit, through what seems to be a barrier in reality, those places are meant for you to cross into. And the beacon that exists in it is your heart simply calling to itself the place that it needs to rest finally and grow into more of who it naturally is. I want to bring up an example too that I thought was like ridiculous. At a certain point, I had left the idea of relationships for long enough. So I started to get this idea in my head. What if I was treating this like relationship thing in the reverse way? Like, what if it was like, I should turn around like and do the exact opposite of what I was doing? I shouldn't go to girls that I thought were like at my level or like appropriate enough for me. I should just turn it around and like feed myself whatever I'm like most fantasizing about, in a sense. Like, I should choose the person I think is like the highest possible person, not the person I think I can get. No, be unrealistic. Choose the person you're actually excited about. Like, choose the movie star for real. I started to go around the internet, and on my computer I started to download pictures, and I just started collecting tons and tons and like thousands literally of pictures. I would pursue them in earnest and like cultivate whatever I thought was like the most beautiful pictures, the highest form of them, almost creating like shrines to them. The more I went into that, the more I pursued that, the more I indulge in it, the more I found something out. I started to like sharpen that desire. I started to crave it more and more and more. And more and more and more, it started to point me in one particular direction. I wasn't even trying to do this. I was trying to like go into that and just be like some slut, essentially, at least just with those pictures for a little bit privately. I would always revisit certain pictures that I liked more than others. I would always revisit certain girls, and little by little I started to notice I got frustrated with those girls because I started to feel like they weren't good enough in some level. They were good enough on one end but not completed on the other end. As I started to get frustrated, I started to just like create ideas in my mind about what was missing and what I needed. And the only people that ended up fitting that, the only people that ended up fitting whatever I was like hungry for, was like the exact qualities that were representative of my twin, Sarah. It turned out that everything I desired, all of those negative desires or all of those distractions like cheating or going somewhere else or whatnot, it always led me back in my physical experience, in my heart experience, and eventually in my highest experience. It led me back to the core. It led me to myself. The qualities I desired naturally in the girl, the height, the shape, the size, the qualities in her personality, the way she laughed. Everything I craved most was literally a mirror reflection of a woman in physical mirroring to myself. I was desirous of myself, physically speaking. And that's where I realized that literally every single relationship on the planet that has ever been ever can be had, doesn't matter how bizarre or dissimilar it seems, doesn't matter from what races or if it's the same gender or whatever, literally, you crave yourself utterly into the very core, the very center, the very depths of who you are. Like any of the negative behavior that you might see people behave as, they're always deeply hungry for more of who they are. They might go about it in the wrong ways, but the general idea is you crave yourself. You are in love with yourself. You already are in love with yourself. You right there listening, your highest love, the like absolute craziest fantasy of all time that you could ever have is you, your twin, your mirror opposite. There's nothing you could want more than to be with yourself. Now, if you can hear that one way, hear it the other way, because the truth is still the same. If you're looking for your twin flame, your soulmate or whatnot, if you're looking for the perfect fit, the perfect match, the real thing that you're really looking for is love with yourself. It doesn't really matter, even if it is a twin or a soulmate or anything like that, if they represent you being truly in the hardest heart of yourself, you found your true love. You found it in yourself. It's almost like saying you can't possibly cheat on yourself because in your deepest honest desire, the person you really are in love with is yourself. Anything that isn't that is just you looking for yourself. So no matter what you're doing, you're always not able to really cheat on yourself because who you want is you. Even if you cheat on yourself, you really want yourself. That's what you're ever after. We're all inherently built good. We're all inherently good. And this is where I have to bring back up the idea of Romeo and Juliet. If Romeo was truly being loyal to his family, he never would have disobeyed his family, snuck into the Capulet's residence, and then put himself in the position where he would have met Juliet. He never would have done that. That's like childishness, right? But in that act, that could never be advised by any kind of spiritual authority, he ended up finding his true calling, his true love. And ironically enough, it's in a place that is absolutely the very height and definition of controversy, but the love was simply too powerful and simply too true. He had found himself. He'd found his reason for being. He'd found his calling. And I want to bring this up, not just to talk about finding your true love, like in a person, but finding your true love in yourself. It is reverse from how you've been taught to look at it. It is not in the place you're taught to look at it in. It is not in the actions you've been taught are good. If you really want to be good, sometimes you have to do what you've been trained is evil, because your heart knows in your heart of hearts where it can find fulfillment. And most of the times it's in places that you're not supposed to be in. That's why we have storytellers as great as Shakespeare, to anchor it into our consciousness. He's telling a truism that exists in the human story about each of us individually, about how we deny ourselves our true happiness. We deny it to ourselves. It's not a question of having to work harder to achieve it. It's a question of owning it where it is. In the true, honest interpretation of what your heart actually is in love with, it contains everything. It is like that slutty fantasy that you might have for somebody, but it's also like the God-sent angel who's here who draw you into your highest calling. And they're not mutually exclusive ideas. They're the exact same thing. It's not you have to choose this at the cost of that, or that at the cost of this. It's when you truly find it, it is this and that. This is that. They are the same thing. That is an experience of true love, and it leaves nothing out. It is perfectly seamless. It has everything accounted for in it perfectly, so that you could not possibly desire anything else but to be it. And because that desire is so strong, in our polarized state, it usually exists in the one place you would never look for it. It exists in the place that creates a story for all of us to actually realize in our lives, so that we physically really actually live it instead of just dreaming about it in the movies. My name is Summer. If you like these videos, please like, share, subscribe, share your stories with me. Tell me if you have an experience, a kind of Romeo and Juliet experience, and what you think about that controversial subject of like literally following your highest excitement. Because in many senses, a lot of people might stop at good enough when they're not really recognizing just how exciting your life could actually be. Have a great day, guys.